thank you all for spending some of your time with us here tonight and investing not only in yourselves, but in your brothers all across the country as we kick off what is going to be another round, another year-long experience within executive development where we get to come together, learn from SIGEP's best and brightest, and really get to invest into what are the things that make leadership work and how can we make that work for the best that we can at our own chapter experiences. A couple of housekeeping items. You've probably heard me say it. If you have not already, give us your name, your chapter, and your position within your Zoom name as we get started here. That'll help us out when we move to breakout rooms later tonight. And a couple of things to keep on your radar in the broader SIGEP world. While this is the first of many executive development sessions that we'll have throughout the year, we will be meeting again on October 19th and 20th, talking about leaving your legacy as chapter officers. So it's a great experience to come together for one last time, largely before a big transition window, to really leave the mark that you want to leave within your position within your own chapters as well. A couple other things that are out there. Trago's Quest to Greece applications are looming on the horizon. If you have not applied already, you should. If you have applied, find another brother to apply as well. It is an experience of a lifetime and one you don't want to miss out just because you didn't put your name in the ring. And then another thing too, with transitions coming around the corner, we are also launching a new program called Springboard this year. It's a great opportunity for some of your rising leaders to get some leadership experience, to find a platform that's going to help them be the people that get elected in your chapters and help them get a framework of experience around the country that's going to make them a better leader going forward. It's a group program. It's one we're very excited about and one that we hope you encourage all of your brothers to attend as well. Those things aside, let's get to the good part of what we're really here for, and that's to talk about motivation and keeping your brothers motivated. With us tonight to be our keynote is a great SIGEP brother, a great friend, Mike Wolbert. So Mike is a 1994 graduate of our Missouri Lambda chapter at Northwest Missouri, where he majored in psychology. And right after graduating, he joined the headquarters staff as a regional director in 94, 95. And stayed on the staff through 1998, where he worked in chapter development and worked specifically with a lot of the initiatives that we did around what's it mean to be a volunteer and how do our volunteers better contribute to the national organization. After his time on the staff, Mike started a career in sales, and he stayed really tied to SIGEP ever since. He's been in member development committees. He's been the chairman of a conclave task force. He's facilitated Carlson Leadership Academies at Ruck Leadership Institutes. And most excitingly, even recently, as this past conclave in Denver, was elected and appointed to the National Board of Directors and is serving SIGEP on the highest level. Is somebody that we're all very, very excited to have with us tonight. Mike also now works as a Senior Vice President of Sales for Classic Cooking LLC. And if you know Mike, you know he cares deeply about SIGEP. You know he cares deeply about people. And you know that he's somebody that is really connected to values, to what motivates people along the way. We're incredibly thankful to have him here with us tonight. And Mike, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks for joining us. Appreciate you guys taking the time out of busy schedules, I'm sure. And thank you to the facilitators as well. Your work is invaluable. And, you know, what's intriguing to me is, so we had the session last night and got done with the session. And I took like a 15-minute break after the session, and then I was actually doing some work, and my wife actually walked up to me and said, "Why are you so fired up?" And I just said, you know, another session with undergraduates, and I just can't help but be excited, enjoy helping undergraduates, and that motivates me as well, which is a great lead into the conversation we're going to have tonight. So here's how I have it structured. I want to talk about a couple things that some basis of motivating yourself and your chapter. And then I want to talk a little bit about my experience in 30 years in sales. And that's in a variety of industries, from food to technology to healthcare software. And then hopefully have some time to open it up for some questions. I would love to have some dialogue. It's always fun to look through the list. As Sean mentioned, I did spend 4 years on the headquarters staff. So I did spend a fair bit of time meeting and, you know, undergraduates, now obviously alumni from a lot of chapters, and just quickly scrolled through, but chapters that I looked on the list that are near and dear to my heart because of time at those chapters: Virginia Xi, Iowa Delta, Michigan Theta, Nebraska Alpha, Oklahoma Alpha, Iowa Gamma, just to name a few. So thanks for joining. It's always intriguing to see life cycles of chapters, good and bad. And I appreciate the work you guys are doing to better yourselves as well. So let's jump right in. I'm going to share my screen, hopefully. Sean, give me a thumbs up. You seeing that? All right. So let's jump right in. So first of all, the interesting topic here, I think, is how to motivate your members and your chapter. For me, I think you got to take a step back and you got to start with yourself. So if you're not motivated, it's really difficult to motivate others. Hopefully we'll talk about this as the conversation continues and also in the questions. But so let's focus on self first for a few minutes. It's got to start with you. And if I were going to give you any advice, 3 things to think about. Number 1, what are your values, your core values? And anybody on the call been through a core values exercise, trying to determine what those are? Okay, see some hands. This journey started for me in 1994 when I was a regional director, and went through this process, and it's evolved tremendously over 30 years. And I'll share my values with you as we progress. But I think it's really important to understand who you are, and I think when you understand who you are, that also helps you understand what motivates you. So my advice would be to start that process now. Go through some of those exercises, find people, whether that's your alumni, volunteer corporation, headquarters staff, faculty, whomever that may be. There's lots of resources out there that can help you start this process. Just start it and continue to evolve as time progresses. And then also, what are your goals? I'm sure all of you have heard all the research on goals and how important it is. And it gets belabored a bit, but I would tell you it does make a difference. And where I think it makes a big difference, yes, it's important for your chapter to have goals, but I would tell you it's as vitally important that you have your personal goals, and hopefully you can align those two. So as you're progressing your chapter towards those goals, you're also achieving some of your personal goals. And then importantly, what's the system that you create or that you adopt that helps you achieve, that keeps you in line with those values and also helps you achieve those goals? There's lots of different scenarios. There's day planners, there's Post-it notes, I'm not going to advocate one or the other. All I'm telling you is figure out a system that works for you and utilize it. Break down the big goals into small goals, make that movement happen weekly, daily. I'll show you my planner here in a second. I'm still old school and still use a daily planner and write down stuff. At the end of each day, if I don't have stuff checked off my list, I forward that to the next day. And it's just a way for me to mark progress towards those ultimate goals. And then at the end of every week, I kind of take a picture of, okay, what did I get done this week? How's that aligned to the bigger goals that I'm thinking for the year? Look, I'm in sales, so it's all about year-end sales number and what am I doing to achieve those goals. So similarly, let's talk about chapter. Lots of chapters go through goal setting exercises, which I think is fantastic. A lot of chapters don't want to do what I would call a big goal setting retreat because it can be uncomfortable. So inevitably what happens is you have a couple hours set aside and you go through an exercise. What I would tell you is take the time to set aside a day, have some fun, do a ropes course, do some other team building exercise, and then have somebody, whether that's campus, alumni. There's a lot of resources out there that are really good facilitators, and that is worth your while. People that are good at facilitating goal setting retreats make a big difference. Take the time to get this right because it will make a big difference for you. think about 3 to 5 goals is all for a chapter. You know, sometimes I'll work with chapters and they're like, here are our chapter goals, and it's a list of 20. And they spend a lot of time coming up with those 20 goals, and they feel like all of those are important. I feel sorry for those chapter presidents because they're going to work their tails off. And the reality is focus on 3 to 5. And I would tell you err towards the 3 side versus the 5 side. But 3 to 5 is a good range. Keep it focused. And then after that, the big goal. So let's take an example, right? We just came off a conclave. Anybody here attend conclave? Show of hands. Okay, there's some hands. So I'm sure several people left saying, we are going to be on that stage in 2 years winning a Buchanan Cup. So the goal is now win a Buchanan Cup. There are literally hundreds of steps that have to go into winning a Buchanan Cup. And if you're not breaking that big goal into small steps to measure your progress along the way, you're not going to get there with a goal that just simply says win a Buchanan Cup in 2 years. So take the time to break those down. What I would tell you as an executive board is it's great to have a big goal. Hopefully that cabinet is breaking that goal down into daily, weekly, monthly steps, and you're holding people accountable to that, which leads us right into accountability. Accountability has to happen. Sometimes it's tough because you got to have tough conversations with people that aren't delivering. I will tell you the conversations I had as an undergraduate around this topic helped me tremendously as I became a manager after college. Embrace that. Find a mentor that can help you work through those conversations if you're struggling with that. But that will help you tremendously as your career progresses. And it's important because, frankly, if you don't hold people accountable, ultimately what you're saying is you are okay not achieving the goal. So let's switch to 30 years of what I wish I knew earlier in life. First of all, and a couple of these are redundant based on conversations we've had so far. So first of all, values matter. I've had, like I mentioned, started this process in 1994. I feel really good about where I am and what my core values are. Again, we'll share those here as we progress. I tell you to go public with those. I do quite often in my business settings because I think it helps you. It holds you accountable to your own goals, which I think is vitally important as well. The other thing I would tell you is, look, you guys are probably part of lots of campus groups and student organizations and other things, and you're going to find along the way that there are groups or movement that's being made in those groups that you don't feel comfortable with or you don't align with. I tell you right now, if they don't align with your values, you need to step aside or work to change the beliefs of that organization so that it aligns with you. But if it doesn't align, stop the behavior, either get it to align or move on and find something that does align with what you believe in. Look, on the National Board of Directors, we do that all the time, right? It's not fun to talk about closing chapters, but when there is a chapter that does not align with our core values, we have to make a decision. We're either okay with allowing that behavior to continue and not being in alignment, or we have to do something about it. And your national board has made decisions along the way to do something about it, which I think speaks highly of our organization. Goals matter. I'm not going to belabor it again, but set your goals, stick to it, check your progress, find mentors that can help. I've been lucky to have 2 guys who have been huge mentors for me in my career. Every single career decision that I've made, I've actually held 8 positions since graduating college. Every one of those, these 2 guys have been part of the decision and helping me evaluate that. As an aside, just for people on the call, note of interest, of those 8 positions, 7 of those were directly due to SIGEP connections. So don't kid yourself. The network is powerful if you utilize it. And finally, accountability. I would tell you, especially in sales, accountability may be the single biggest issue we face as a society in making progress. So hold people accountable, do the work to hold yourself accountable, hold your peers accountable. And if they're not doing the job, do something about it. So let's talk about change here. So if somebody's not doing the job, what do you do, right? Can lead to some tough conversations. What I put in the presentation is very few people change. And I love to reference a Fast Company article from about 20 years ago. Heart surgeons do about 600,000 bypass and angioplasty surgeries. And that's probably a dated number, but because it's from that article, it's probably higher than that. But if you were literally faced with a decision to, okay, you just had bypass surgery, but that is a temporary fix to a problem. You have to change your lifestyle, whether that's stop drinking, stop smoking, eat better, work out, et cetera, et cetera. And if a doctor told you, if you don't change your lifestyle, you will die, the intriguing point of that is 90% of the people faced with that decision did not change their lifestyle. So think about that. That's brutal and fatal. We're not dealing with that, but think about it in lesser terms than that. It's very time intensive to work with somebody to change their behavior. And at some point you have to make the decision. And look, I'm all in favor. What I'm saying is just make the decision. You're either going to work with somebody to change their behavior, or you've got to make the decision to not and move on. Those can be tough decisions. And again, either one of those is a valuable decision. Helping people change and spending time helping someone grow through that process is valuable. But if you do that, you may have to set aside your goals both personally and within your chapter, which again is okay. It's just a decision that you have to think about. So I'm a psychology major, and there's a lot of people who say, wow, psychology has nothing to do with sales. What's the linkage? What I would tell you is it has a lot to do with it. And one of the things that I learned is, especially as a manager, is it's really important to figure out what makes people tick, what is motivating to them. And person A, the motivation may be very different than person B, right? So in sales, there's a lot of people who are motivated by the win or getting public recognition, getting on stage and getting an award, et cetera, et cetera. But there's a subset of people that don't enjoy that at all, and that's not what they enjoy. So you have to kind of don't use one model is my point here, right? Figure out what makes the individual people on your executive board tick. Figure out what makes your individual members tick, and then utilize that to your advantage to drive the organization forward. I spent a lot of time on organizational behavior, team building. I find it fascinating. I hope each one of you gets the opportunity to be part of a high-performing team because it's a thing of beauty. I know that sounds a little cliche, but being part of a group that achieves great things is phenomenally rewarding, and I hope each one of you gets that opportunity. The flip side of that is I've probably learned as much in my career from things that didn't work out well or being part of non-performing teams, which I think is also important because it helps you understand what not to do, how not to be a manager. I've had some bad managers in my career, and I've learned as much from them about managing people and how not to manage people as I did from the really good ones. So just take all of that in and use it to your advantage. Learn and adopt best practices. I read a lot. I travel a lot for work, so I spend a lot of time on planes. I listen to podcasts and I read. I try to stay up on current events or current trends within business. I just think that's important to stay relevant. And as a byproduct, I learn a lot and I adopt those things as I have the opportunity to. So I'll show it to you as we progress. Here's the book, cheap plug. So the Leadership Challenge is a great book. I would tell you, if you haven't read it, you should. And interestingly enough, SIGEP has adopted that book as kind of the basis of our leadership development programming. So if nothing else, take the time to read it, because if you go to a Ruck Leadership Institute or even Quest to Greece, you'll likely hear about that book and you'll be a couple steps ahead. So let's talk about some truths that I've learned. First of all, culture eats strategy for lunch every day. So what does that mean? You can have the best goals and the best strategy to achieve those goals, but if the culture of your chapter runs counter to that, you are not going to be able to achieve those goals. So sometimes you have to take a step back from your goals and work on culture, which can be really tough. And I would tell you, if that is your case, find some mentors, headquarters staff, alumni, et cetera, that can help you work through that, because it can be challenging, but it's vitally important that the culture aligns with the strategy and what you're trying to achieve. If they don't, it's going to be a really tough road. So again, I'm in sales. At the end of the day, for me, it's about measuring the improvement we're making on the sales front. So for me, it's about results or bullshit. I have one of those two mentors that I mentioned that are both SIGEPs. This is his famous quote. And what he would tell you is it's results or bullshit, and the time or the time needed to do both is exactly the same. So spend your time achieving results, or spend your time working out the excuses as to why you're not achieving the results. At the end of the day, the time needed to do either one of those is about the same. You've just got to decide which side of the equation you're going to be on. And then finally, I would tell you, after 30 years of experience, there's not a lot of difference between most people, between 8 and 5. Where the real difference is made is before 8 and after 5. I mentioned it before, I use my planner, and at the end of the day, after 5, I'm going through that planner and I'm moving things forward to the next day that I didn't get done, checking things off that I got done. That's when the real progress happens, especially early in your career. And that's when you can set yourself apart. All right, let's stop sharing the screen. So I held up a couple things. You might not be, is the screen not sharing anymore? Okay, so I held up a couple things you might not have seen. So here's the leadership challenge. If you don't have that, find a mentor that will buy that for you, or go and get it. It's not that difficult of a book to get through. It's pretty, basic's a bad word to use, because I think it's very relevant, even though it's got some years behind it, but it's really easy to follow and understand. And there's not a lot of 25-point Scrabble words in this book. So take the time to read it. And then the other thing that I'll show you is, again, back to the systems. Here's my planner. So I spent 3 hours in the car today. You'll notice this little Post-it note here that's full. Those are all things that I wrote down thinking about while I was driving today. Those haven't made it in my planner, but they will. And literally, here's the list of things. If you go back a couple days, you'll see some check marks. Today was not an overly productive day because I had a couple emergencies that I had to deal with, but that's okay. They will simply just get added and moved over as we progress. And again, I think it's less about the system. Don't go out and buy a planner tomorrow. If you don't have something, figure it out. But look, I've seen a lot of people that just use a spiral notebook, and that's perfectly fine. Got a lot of people who I know use Post-it notes. That's okay too. What I'm telling you is just figure out a system that works for you and use it to your advantage. All right, let's open it up. What questions do you have?
So everybody, as you're thinking about any of the topics that we just talked about here as well, toss around some questions into the chat as well. We may pull a couple of you guys off mute to go back and forth a little bit. But toss those questions, any questions you may have out there, whether it's related to motivation or whether it's just curiosity, toss that in the chat. Mike, to get us started on one, at least, question of motivation. One thing that we didn't talk about was didn't talk anything about locker room speeches, or like those pivotal moments in sports movies that everybody gets chills about. We're talking like much more nuts and bolts. Like, from your experience, what's the relationship of those two, and how does that really come to life? Which of those actually gets people motivated in the reality of the day to day? Yeah,
so a great question. So I'm not a motivational speaker. That's not my thing, right? So Can I do it if needed? Sure. But at the same time, my personality profile that's not also what motivates me, right? So go back to my high school football days, the halftime speech, that's not where I got motivated. Where I got motivated was at practice, doing the drills, figuring out the playbook, making sure I knew the playbook. And that's translated to today with my planner and that sort of thing. So I am much more motivated by the nuts and bolts and seeing daily progress versus what I'll call is the flash in the pan of the charismatic leader. And look, some people do a great job and have led great lives and made a whole lot of money being a charismatic speaker. For me, it's more about the day-to-day, slow, steady progress towards those ultimate goals. I had a boss once that said the thing about a sales career is you've got a big rock to push up a hill, and on day 365, that rock ends up back at the bottom of the hill and you start all over again. And for some people, that's terribly demotivating. For me, I enjoy pushing the rock every day, making the small steps to get to the end result versus trying to push that rock up the hill all at one time. All right, so I'm seeing a couple questions here. So Paul, you want to come off mute? Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Just checking my food in the oven.
That's all right. Yeah, so why don't you ask your question for the group, and then let's talk about it.
Yeah, so I was curious. You talked about accountability and holding others accountable. And when people don't stay accountable to what you tell them to do, you should be doing something about it. So I was curious, could you elaborate further? So what exactly do you do about it? How do you go about figuring out the best way to do that in that situation? So a lot of times it looks different for different people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it also looks different based on the situation, right? So let me give you a real life scenario. So I am one of three on a sales team for this small company called Classic Cooking. And we use sales brokers, and we have a sales broker that is just simply not doing the job. So today I had to call that person, that senior level manager at that broker, and say, you got to help me here. What's going on? And we had a good conversation, but ultimately the message I had to relay was, we're paying you to do a job. You're not doing it. Therefore, I'm not going to meet my results for the end of the year. So I have to make a decision. Do I like you? You're a nice person. I enjoy my conversations, but this is about results and you're not getting them. So what are we going to do about it? And created a 30-day timeline for him on what he's going to do with his team and how they're going to engage. And I said, okay, I want to see the plan, want to understand how you're going to do, what you're going to do differently, how you're going to meet those goals and press forward. And I can tell you, it's a 30-day plan. 7 days in, I'm calling him and we're going to start talking about that plan and what they've achieved and I'm not waiting until day 29 to make that call. Right. So I translate it back. That seems a little harsh, maybe. Right. I mean, I know I'm in sales and working for a company and people are getting paid and we can make a decision to fire a sales broker. And but at the same time, there's a lot of aspects of that relate back to chapter experience. And I think back to my chapter experience. As chapter president, there were people on my executive board that I knew 1 month in were not going to do the job. And what did I choose to do? Yeah, had some conversations with them, but ultimately we just looked at the stuff that person was going to get done and somebody else had to step in and do it. If I could go back and relive that, I'd have a tougher conversation early. And at some point, if that behavior continued, I'd have a conversation about finding somebody different for that role. So I see a question here about can you share what your goals are now and how you came up with them. So I'm going to split that up between personal and professional. So professional, I work for a relatively small company, spent a lot of time with big companies, wanted to get into the startup environment. I've been here 7 years. When I joined the company, we were about 9 million in sales. We're going to clip probably 75 million this year. it's been a blast because it's not the corporate environment. I don't have hierarchies. Literally, I report directly to our owner, which has been very liberating. And I truly enjoy that. I can't see myself ever going back to a big corporate job because of this experience. So what's intriguing about the professional goals is it's on me. We ended the year last year and the owner said, what do you think we can do this year? And we sat down and ran some numbers, and basically I told him what I thought we could do. And I had to enroll the other 2 people on the sales team to believe in that number. And we're going to hit it. And next year we've got a bigger goal and we're going to keep pressing forward. So obviously I can't share my absolute professional goals with you, but they're all very growth oriented around sales and key customers. And some of that kind of plays out for itself. One of our biggest customers is Costco, and I manage them directly. So I spend a lot of time with them, and it's a lot about making sure my day, like you guys, right? My text ding a lot. My email is exploding all the time. I have to make the decision to detach from that. And yes, there are immediate things that I have to do, but I have to look at the allocation of time to achieve those big goals, which I also think is very important for you guys to learn early. Now on the personal front, a little easier. So every year I have a goal to read a certain number of books. I have a goal about spending time with friends and family. I've been lucky enough to have a core group of guys. Most of them I met while I was on the headquarters staff, and we have a fantasy football league together, and we try to get together every August for a fantasy football draft. And yes, we do our draft, but then we also spend a lot of time just talking about work and what we're doing. And interestingly, a guy, a couple months ago, right in August when we had our draft, said, I feel like I'm kind of stagnant, right? So I'm pressing 50. I'll be 50 in January. And so call it our midlife crisis. And we said, you know what, let's get a small subset together. We're going to get together twice a year, and it's just going to be focused on personal and professional growth and keeping kind of the freshness around that. So we're going to get together in November, December. We're putting together an agenda. We're going to talk about, like somebody's going to talk about a book they've read. Somebody's going to talk about some stuff that's going on at work. But the other thing we said was, let's bring some other people into this mix outside of this group that, okay, hopefully in, I don't know what the number is, couple years, 10 years, whatever. Hopefully we'll be successful enough to maybe invest in something else. And so, you know what, we're going to start pursuing some of those opportunities. Nothing may come of it. But again, those are some stretch goals for the small group. Front and center for me in my planner. So here are my personal goals. I'll share this, not my goals, I'm sorry, my core values. So let me share the screen again with you and just share those because I think it's important as well. Hopefully you guys can see that. So 30 years of experience here, I boiled it down to 4 things. And there's some bullet points underneath each one of those. But for me, it's about being authentic, being outcome oriented, being smart, and forever learning. So under authentic, what you see with me is what you get. If you don't like it, I'm okay with that, but it's who I am and I'm comfortable with that. Never compromise your integrity. Look, you guys all hear amazing stories about used car salesmen and being slick. I'm a sales guy. I'm in that industry. I refuse to be part of that stereotype. So sometimes I have to have tough conversations, but I'm okay with it because it's based on facts and integrity. And I meet my commitments. So if somebody asks me to do something, I may not meet them on time sometimes, but I will meet my commitments. And I take great pride in saying that I do that. I'm outcome oriented. Results matter to me. I spend a lot of time looking at metrics that I think matter. So count what counts and inspect what you expect, which I think is a great learning thing for you guys as officers. If you are not checking in with your cabinet members and your committee chairman, et cetera, and inspecting what you expect from them, you're not going to achieve your goals. And sometimes you just got to take a guy to lunch and have a conversation about the Balanced Man Scholarship. And is that, is the banquet scheduled on time, and did the applications go out? And yeah, sometimes that seems really rudimentary, but if you're not asking those questions along the way, you may be surprised by the end result, and you don't want to be surprised by it. Smart for me is a broad term, but for me, I work for a small company. We act like owners, so I don't spend the night in $200 hotel rooms when I travel. I'm quite happy in a Hampton Inn spending $100 a night, and that's okay with me. I just want to be smart with resources and utilize them wisely. I value perspective. Early in my career, I would tell you I would come to a decision and move forward with that decision because I thought it was the right answer. I think there's a lot of value in finding the second right answer. And even though the second right answer may not be the best right answer, the work being done in that gap or the conversations getting to the second right answer, a lot of times you'll learn something that you didn't think about with the first right answer. And then forever learn. So I read a lot. I try to keep my knowledge base expanding. And I also am now at a point in my career where I benefited tremendously from some mentors, and I want to share that with some folks. As a matter of fact, had a call today on my 3-hour drive with one of my mentees and working through some issues that he's got going on. And I think it's really important. And it also helps motivate me, right? So I'm talking about this stuff with you. It only reinforces all that behavior for me, right? So really interesting story for me it's probably 15 years ago, I had the opportunity to facilitate a Ruck Leadership Institute. And I came back from that week, and my manager, maybe 3 weeks after that, said, "What in the heck happened to you?" And I said, "What do you mean?" And he's like, "The performance is off the chart." And I said, "Well, I just spent a week facilitating with high performance undergraduates, helping them through some stuff. And that motivates me, right?" And so that boss, who I've worked for 3 different times, by the way, said, "I will pay for you to go facilitate that. Not only is it not going to cost you anything, but you're not going to take any vacation days when you're taking that away, because we as a company see the benefit of you going to do that," right? So there's a couple stories in there. Find what motivates you and do that, but then also align yourself with people who see that side of it and can evaluate it, and you can benefit from that as well. All right. What's the best way to go about pushing pushback when you're trying to hold them accountable? Good question. And at the end of the day, hopefully you have some form of, what's the word I'm looking for? Look, if it's a chapter goal, or if it's a deliverable that they agreed to do and they're not doing it, I would just continue to say, this is what we all agreed to, right? If the goal is to win a Buchanan Cup and we have to be number 1 in grades, and you're the academic chairman and you're not programming, and therefore we're not going to be number 1 in grades, you've got to make a decision. So I would just go back to the data, and hopefully you have the goals and the process in place to say, this isn't me holding you accountable. This is all of us, right? This is what you agreed to do. I heard you talk briefly about detaching from yourself and looking at the bigger picture. Just curious. Are you a Jocko Wilnick podcast listener? All right. Is it Robert or Bob? Why don't you come off mute and explain a little more? So I do know who you're talking about. I believe Jocko is Navy SEAL, correct? Yeah. So interestingly enough, the Patriot Tour. So if you've watched the movie Lone Survivor, Jocko's kind of in that same mix. So I actually went and saw the Patriot Tour and have a signed book on my bookshelf back there from Marcus Luttrell. I find that wildly motivating and interesting. And, I would tell you, he's a little extreme for me sometimes. But, there's something to be said about Navy SEALs. A lot of what you read about high performance teams, right? Navy SEALs are about the pinnacle of that. But I think, also have to take a step back and say that team is built to do a specific mission. And a lot of us don't have to deal with that mission, right? So a lot of the hell they endure may not be appropriate for others. But look, what they do is tremendous.
Sweet. Mike, thank you for all the questions here. I've got two more for you. One's a fun one, and then one will put us on a good note of action to end on before we break out into breakout rooms by officer position out here. Going back a while, you mentioned a good group of people that you still have in your life that get together for a fantasy football draft. One, want to know how your fantasy team's doing this year. And then two, after we get the rundown on what the squad's looking like, would love to know out of all the things we've talked about here, if there's one thing to put to action, what would you say it should be?
So we're 2-1, which is an okay place. I digress a little bit. So our fantasy team's a lot of fun. It's as much smack talking as it is caring about football, but it's a way for us to stay connected and stay involved, which is the primary goal. But a couple of years ago, we decided that the winner of the year gets to pick where the draft is going to be the following year, which has been a fun environment. And it's transitioned, which I think a lot of people do in life, right? So early on, we spent most of our drafts were in Vegas because that's a fun place to be when you're 25 years old and there's 15 of you together. We've now transitioned to doing experiences. So this most recent one, we decided we're going to go to Northern California because a couple guys are there. Winery, kayaking in the Bay, some of that stuff that some people haven't done. So, some things on our list, Bourbon Trail, but we're also looking at things like, can we do Oktoberfest in Munich? Can we do some bigger opportunities like that? So, we've all grown together. Some of these guys are wildly successful, which is great to see. And I'd love to say that I knew them as they were regional directors way back when. But it's been fun to stay connected and we keep each other motivated. So the one thing I would tell you is figure out your system, right? One of my mentors, it was funny, right after coming off the staff, I sent him a note and just said, "Hey, happy birthday. Hope it's a good one." And he came back and he said, "My man, you figured out your system. Congratulations." I said, "What do you mean?" He's like, "The people that ping me early in the morning on a birthday day, I know have a system they've figured out. They don't have that committed to memory, right? They've figured it out. They've got a system. They get to the office, they see the reminder, it's somebody's birthday, and they send the note," which I think is vitally important. On that presentation, you may have seen that blurb about a short pencil is better than a long memory. I'm a huge fan of that. I can't keep all the stuff I have to do on a daily basis in my brain, but if I write it down, I don't forget it, and I can remove it from trying to remember. So that's why you see the Post-it note that I did today while I was on the 3-hour drive, and there's probably 15 things on there that are going to make it into my planner that I wasn't thinking about. So figure out your system. Again, I'm system agnostic. I don't care what it is, just figure out the system and figure out what works for you and then use it to the maximum.